after 2 years of being away from each other and disconnected, with the anxiety and uncertainty of COVID, tell us how it feels for you to be back out on the road singing live in front of your fans.
Oh, it's very surreal. It's very surreal. And there was an awful lot of Zoom. But I think for me, a lot of the creative process developed almost untouched. And it was a strange one because I figured as things transform, as you grow older as a human being, sometimes you have to be really present with that learning. But I think what I found for me was we had to, I think, as humans, get very peaceful with the idea that a lot of things were not certain. And actually, as an artist, as a creative person, that's a very useful skill to have, to be able to be cool with rocking with whatever is going on around you, even if it's total chaos. And in some ways, the job of, you could say the job of an artist, but also the job of humankind is to sort of alchemize with the forces that we're faced with. And I think there's just a great big question mark hanging over those last 2 years. And it's almost about saying, okay, so that's what that is. Now, what can I make out of it? How can I transform that into something that gives me ideas, something that gives me energy, something that gives me perspective? And so I tried to do that, but it was a weird time. And I'm not going to lie, it was bizarre. But there were golden nuggets within, I think.
What is it about music that is inherently human, that's sort of in our DNA, almost like a higher order need, that whether you're playing it or listening to it, that makes us feel alive and connected? Can you translate that for us? That's a deep one.
It's a deep one. I personally feel the line between creating and listening to is actually very thin. And I like to bend it. Because actually when you listen to music and you participate in the act of it occurring, you're kind of making it as well. Your ears are following it. You're sort of tracing its outline, its lines. And so I'm always blown away when I try that singing thing. Because it tends to work. And most of it is just believing that you're going to do it. It's like, you will now do this. And you do. But something about the structure of it is kind of inherent to people. And I think that communication and expression is very inherent. And sometimes all people need is just a reason to do so. It's like, it's okay. You can. You have permission to do that. I think for me as a kid, when I was growing up, what drew me to music was the idea that it was this kind of omni language. And you could express very interesting subtle curves and subtle lines and things without saying what it was. And it's almost like a higher resolution language than words in some ways, because words are kind of blunt. It's sort of like word, placed together and things. But music, you can be really kind of abstract. You can show what's not there as much as you can show what's there. And a lot of it just belongs to us as people already without having to push it down anybody's throat, as it were. So there's something about music and there's something about the voice for me that really ignites a sense of sort of connection, community, atmosphere, emotion. Yeah.
I think it must be deep enough, to our survival that we connect as social creatures. I still don't know the answer to that. Probably there's some neuroscientists out there from USC that could tell us that, and some musicians. Miles had a question on creativity.
I have a question. All right. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
All right.
What's up,
just
Miles?
wanted to thank you for coming in, Jacob. And I was wondering, what are some techniques that you can offer us to use to help develop our creativity and bring our best, most creative selves to whatever it is that we're doing in our lives?
Wow. Great question.
Thank you.
I would say embrace the nonsense, because sense is massively overrated. I think it makes sense. It's not important. And I find nonsense, I'm drawn to nonsense more than I am sense, especially in the beginning of an idea. Because nonsense frees you from the idea that it's serious and there are straight lines. There were no lines. People put the lines there. It belongs within, it belongs without. It's made up. A lot of things are made up in the world. But when it comes to an idea, the idea of making no sense, I personally find to generate a certain kind of friction that kind of starts me rolling in a way where I'm not following a rule. And many rules that I follow, I made up myself. And those are almost more alarming to follow than other people's rules to a point, because they're inherent to me. So if you take a piece of paper and you try and make the least amount of sense you possibly can, you'll be surprised at how much sense it makes. And if you reverse engineer the kind of backwards sense, you end up with really interesting kind of ideas that come from deeper in your consciousness than the surface. And I mean, as a songwriter, for example, I've spoken to people who are within the school of thought where you have to write about your real life experiences. I broke up with a girl, I was really sad, or I'm really happy today, or I ate chocolate, whatever. But For me, I just, for some reason, I start that process, begin the idea. And often if I try and do that, it's like there's no ignition. And what you're looking for is almost a chemical reaction. You know, you have to sort of court the moment where the chemical reaction happens. And I find nonsense to be a great place to start. So I would say that. Yeah.
Hi.
Howdy.
I'm Hannah. My question is, how do you play the role of being the musician's musician and write music for the group of fans who are really steeped in music complexity and understand the difficulty of what you're doing, while also appealing to a much broader audience?
Yeah. If I thought about all of those things, I would go crazy. If I tried to do that, I thought, oh, I've got to do this and this and this and that, you know. So I try not to think about them too much. I try and just kind of make the music that is the right music for me to make, and the music that feels the newest and the freshest and the most thrilling. In some ways, what other people think of you is not really your business. Like, your business is to be you to the fullest, most expounded extent. And then people will say, oh, it looks like he's trying to do this, or his goal must be this, or his thesis is X, Y, and Z. And in some ways, education is an interesting structure because it encourages people to have a real strong directive. We were even talking about this earlier on, the idea of a goal, right? You have one goal, and that's your goal, and you get there, and once you're there, it's going to be great. But the truth is that that's not how the world works, and oftentimes a path is wiggly and wobbly, and so I think that embracing the idea that there's not necessarily one goal in, say, for example, an idea that I have or create is a crucial thing to bear in mind, because the goal of your idea is within the idea rather than being within your intention sometimes. You can also set out and say, I am definitely going to do this one thing. And I find myself in my life doing that actually less than setting out to kind of unpack what's already there. It's almost like you're chiseling away at a sculpture. So I wonder what's within this thing that's already complete. Let me just remove the extraneous layers of fear and kind of uncertainty and unfamiliarity, whatever, and get to what was there all along, rather than thinking, oh, along the way, at the end of the long mountain trek, there is a destination, and I'm not complete till I get there, you know. And I think that we're encouraged to think that way within education because it's a system of exams and a system of kind of ranking people and things like that, because that's how that system survives, is as long as that ranking system exists. So I personally find myself quite freed by the idea that it doesn't really, you don't need to have a dream, you know. You don't have to set out and think, this is my dream, I'm going to go achieve it. You can just be curious. And I think if you're curious, then your dreams will take you by surprise, you know. And that's a really lovely, gladdening, kind of mind-opening space to be in, because your life will be like that. And nothing is really linear, you know. Things often twist and turn. So going about your ideas thinking, I wonder what this is going to become, rather than thinking, if it doesn't become this thing, then I'm failing, you know, or something like that. And certain things in life are more suited than others to that. And I would say songwriting or music creation is a nice space to not worry too much about people and what they feel. And, oh, is it musical enough for me, or is it commercial enough for me, or is it whatever? And in the past couple of years, it's been very interesting. Since the Album of the Year nomination, it's just a weird moment, because I had all these new voices in my life that I'd never really had before, sort of pop music people. So, well, it's great that your intention is this, because I'm thinking, is my intention that? I can't remember. I can't remember if it was or not. It's important in those moments just to ground yourself in you know, where you come from and who you are, and to stay as in the present as you can, because the past and the future, they're not real. They're not actually there at all. It's just an illusion. So it's nice to be in the present and just to think, well, I wonder where the day will take me today.
I was at your show before COVID, so it was the last LA tour, might have been the Wiltern, and you asked the audience how many people, I was with this guy, Mike Catone, who's out in the audience, a tremendously gifted musician in his own right, and he says, this is probably the hippest audience you'll ever see at a show. And I, what do you, like, by hip, do you mean cool? He goes, no, the most musically knowledgeable. And you asked how many musicians out there, and I'm not joking, like 70% of the audience raised their hands. I was like, oh my God, this is, and then you asked, how many beats in the measure? And everyone yelled, 7.
7. Yeah.
Who knows 7 beats in a measure besides musicians? And so I asked 2 really good musicians today, sort of, what is the attraction, what is the appeal of Jacob to the master musician? And one just said it's the combination of mastery and joy. and the other gave an explanation that I can't even translate, but it was fantastic. But I think, but I think what it is, and why sort of the mortals among us who don't master an instrument or a voice, I think it's like this special place that only you guys get to go to. It's that, VIP room in the club. We're in the club in the main room, but you're like in that back room that's reserved for the people who've spent decades and decades practicing and becoming great at something, which we all admire. And so I see that admiration of mastery and joy. And that's something, when you write, I know that you don't have that in mind, but it's funny because on Sunday night, you sort of sheepishly said, I'm going to play a song for you, and I sort of apologized because it's in 4/4. So what is the role of complexity in your music when you're composing?
It's a really great question. It's funny, the VIP club vibe. It's almost it's a vast shame, I think, that people in the world see things in that way, and I get it. But at the same time, I almost feel like the richest moments in my creative life are the moments where I feel the youngest, just the youngest, not the oldest and most accomplished and most knowledgeable and most gathered and most collected. It's the moments where I'm the most open. And I think openness is the opposite of a VIP club. It's almost like the walls come down and there was no VIP main room division, and there were also no walls to the club, And so the idea that there's just this mass of energy, you can't live your entire life in that space because it's just chaos, But existing in that way from time to time as a human is great, and as an artist is crucial. When I think about complexity, I often think about a useful metaphor for complexity. I think is a flower. Flowers are lovely, and if you look at a flower, you think, oh, that's a simple flower, just growing out of the land. Lovely, great. I love the lovely flower. Nice color, great. And a flower is so inherently simple. It's so complex at the same time, because, as I'm sure many people in this room can explain far better than I ever will be able to, when you zoom in to that flower and you explore its resolution, its real density, and its real delicacy, it's astonishingly well crafted. But I think that the mastery of the flower is just to be a flower. It's like, I'm a flower. I did it, And I almost think about that as a human too. You think, I'm just a human. I'm humaning, and that's all I can do. And I think that the world is inherently so complex, and in some ways our job, one of our jobs as people, is to be able to receive all of those frequencies that life gives us, whether it's the very blunt blows or the super complex kind of rich, subtle elements that you have to be really, really, really quiet, internally quiet to really perceive. And to wrap that all up and express it in a way that is easier to understand, And so I would say that complexity at its finest is very simple indeed, because it's built into the natural world and it's built into what it means to be a human being.
And you're right, it appeals to everyone, whether we can fully understand the complexity of the flower or we just appreciate it from a distance.
Right, all the levels are fine.
Yes.
You can say it's a flower, it's lovely.
Right.
Job done.
And that's the beauty of music.
All right, hi, I had
Hi, Kai.
quick question about authenticity. You mentioned earlier that your approach is just to make exciting music, which is a great idea, right? But these days there's a barrier in between your music and our ears. There's that business film in the way.
Yeah.
I was wondering how you balance your pursuit of music as a pure, exciting art form with pressures from things like record labels and basically that financial aspect of it.
Yeah. Well, I think in some ways to divide all the elements is tough. Because I think when I started out, I was quite opposed to the idea of having any kind of labels or management or anything whatsoever. It was all just me. And I needed, in some ways, that cocoon to be able to speak all the languages necessary to articulate my vision for myself. And this is when I had like 0 fans, like one, like my mum, And when I was in that space, 16, 17, all I cared about was just how beautiful can this possibly be, the thing I'm making? How deep can it go? How broad can it get to? And as I grew older, I began to learn the ropes. You know, when you're an artist in the music industry, it helps, for example, to have a booking agent to help book your shows, and a manager to help on, you know, make the decisions and do the heavy lifting, and a band if you want as well, and many other people besides. And it was an unknown world to me. But I think what I've realized is it's all part of the same brushstroke, you know, and you can't divide this brushstroke, which is one about, you know, making money and building a fan base, from the brushstroke of creating, you know, rich music that brings you joy, which is confusing, because I think that when you get those two things confused, it can be just, you get these strange overtones of one part of the operation is dissonant with another, and that's a strange one. But, you know, I think for me, I firmly believe that if you make really beautiful things that you just love, and you articulate them really clearly and well, and fearlessly, and kind of leave them in the world for people to find, I think that there's a particular kind of gravity that comes to those things when they're thrown with freedom and abandon and kind of trust. I didn't really care about fans when I was a teenager at all. I never really thought, I'm going to be a musician that's famous, you know, touring, and I never thought about touring at all. I just thought it would be just so great if I made this so good. I just want to be so good. And so my first fans were people who kind of understood on kind of technical and emotional levels, like the kinds of things I was attempting, which were quite strange things, you know, sort of microtonal chords and you know, rhythms in 11 divisions and things like that, because I was just so thrilled by them. Like, wow, that's so crazy. There's a feeling I don't know. And as a musician, you take in lots of sensations and you kind of alchemize with those forces. You try and reverse engineer those results. I spent so many years focusing on that and not on the business at all. And I almost started my career, I would say, by accident, because one of my YouTube videos that I made, which is a cover of a Stevie Wonder song called Don't You Worry About a Thing, it sort of it found its way to some very luminary people. One of them being Quincy Jones, who you mentioned, and Quincy opened a lot of doors for me, and the main one was to his team, and Michael's in the house, and you mentioned Michael earlier on, and Michael has been my manager for 8 years, and has really helped me understand how the whole thing fits together, and we've almost grown up together in that world, so thinking, how is it done when you attempt to put this music into the world? And a lot of times I found there's not really like an established place for like Jacob music in the world. There's not a playlist for it, for example. But you have to make a space for yourself first. If you don't make a space for yourself, then no one's going to make space for you. You have to say, this is my space. And if you mean that, and you really you go about it with strength and commitment and time, it takes time, then the world has no choice but to say, well, singers, you're here. We have to make space at the table for you, you know. And I think one of the biggest shames is to say, well, singers, there's only this amount of space on the table. I'll just make myself smaller and sit here. And but it's very easy to do that because people around you encourage you to be smaller, I think, especially in education. So it'd be great if you just fit into this category here. But you can play the piano with a sense of trust and freedom in the same way that you can play the whole music industry like that. You can say, I'm going to play the industry, wah! And it's the whole thing's an experiment. Think, I wonder what happens if you, and then ... And one of those things can be put a half diminished chord in place of a, you know, super whatever. Or one of them could be, you know, attempt to put this music out into the world, or one might be tour with a one-man show, which I did for 3 years with the Circle of Musical Instruments. These things hadn't really been done before, but the only way to find out is to try. You know, is you have to try, you have to trust, and you have to surround yourself with people who really kind of love you and who you really love.
Hi, thanks for coming. My name's Lauren. You've spoken a bit about how music is much like language and like storytelling, and I'm wondering if you could maybe even show us kind of how you craft phrases that take audiences and listeners on a journey and then still bring them back home, so to speak.
Yeah. Let's do it. So that's such a lovely question. So a lot of music in my mind is about arcs, right? Like it goes up, what goes up comes down. I might close this actually. That's fine. Yeah, like what goes up comes down. You see, it's like an answer and then it's a question, and there's tension and there's release. So it's kind of a binary thing if you break it right down. Every song is basically, that's every song. And there's just like different ways of achieving that feeling, isn't it? Like I'm at home, someone give me a key. E minor. Oh, it's a bit of a plaintive home, but we'll start there. So, if we're at home in E minor, harmonically speaking, we have neighbors, and we have locality, you could say. In fact, can I be in E major just for a second? Oh, I appreciate that, man. So I'm in E major. Actually, you know what? I am going to show you something on my computer, which is going to help with this. So. Thank you. Look at this lovely circle. Has anyone seen this before? It's a very simple circle. Some people call it the circle of fifths. You can also call it the circle of fourths. It's kind of up to you. It's completely made up. So the useful thing about this circle is that it's just a nice shape. And also, it shows kind of localities, you could say. So in terms of where keys are placed and how they interact with each other. So see at the top we have C. This is C. Actually, if you could sing a C, that'd be really nice. Ooh. Okay. So right now, you're bang in the middle of home. You're like, that's where you are. That's my key. If you keep singing the C, and I'm going to move to F now. So you're now not quite home. You're what we call in music the fifth of the chord, which means you're here. So your relationship with the chord has changed. So this is the thing about chords. There's all sorts of notes you can add to the chord that changes the chord's quality and function and gravity. And a lot of music and narrative is about movement and change. So and momentum, you could say. So if I'm in C, my two sort of primary neighbors are F and G, right? And or like a lot of songs, probably like 75% of all songs in C, use C, F, and G, and that's it. It's fine. You know, there's lots of things you can do with C and F and G. And one of the first things you can do is you can change the order of the notes, which is called inversion. So this is one example of C, and here's another one. I'm just reorganizing the notes, and here's another one. Yeah. So there's 1, 2, 3. And they all just have different feelings and different amounts of movement and momentum and gravity. This, for example, is a lovely inversion because you're home in C, but you're also not quite home, are you? It's like you're not like there. You're just sort of perching, but with groundedness, you know. Whereas if I'm in this inversion, that wants to move. It wants to move to somewhere different. You know. So this is like the least settled, and this is half settled, and this is home. So this is before we add any kind of like spicy notes at all. It's just 3 notes, just a triad. We say a triad is a 3-note chord, C, E, and G. And so that's C to F and C to G. And if I keep going further along this way, then I sort of climb upwards into the bright zone. You see the bright zone. So here's G, and here's D, and here's A, and E, B, and F sharp, which is also known as G flat. And if I were to go the other way, then it's C to F, to B flat, to E flat, to A flat, to D flat. It kind of gets darker. In my opinion, it feels like it gets darker. So there's all sorts of ways you can approach keys and move around within keys. But say I'm in E major, right? And say I have a melody. The melody could go, say, what about this one? It's a nice melody. So as a musician and a harmonist, I have so many choices about what that melody does, what the properties of it, and those choices come around when I harmonize it with chords. And you could say melody is like the words or the line, And chords are like the emotional fabric beneath them or within them that give them a sense of purpose and direction. And rhythm is about where they're placed in time. Those are the three main elements of music: melody, rhythm, and harmony. So choice-wise, each of these notes has a whole set of chords. In fact, every single note goes with every single chord. So B, which is the first note of our melody, goes with E. It also goes with C, and it goes with G, and it goes with F sharp minor, and it goes to C sharp minor, and it goes to B flat 7, and it goes with E minor 7, and it goes with E7, and it goes with D flat 7, and there's literally every chord, like every single one. And so one of your responsibilities when you learn music is to become acquainted with your options, because then when you're a storyteller and you're thinking about harmonizing this, you can describe how you want it to feel. So that, for example, is less resolved than that, because it's perching. And it might move, you don't know. Or if I were to go like that, this note here is a D. And that note doesn't really fit in E major, because it's darker than E. It's D. So it's more of the anti-clockwise direction. So if I establish I'm in E major, and then I start using notes like that, it's a bit just particular feeling, isn't it? It's like a darkness is coming, which is very different from the idea of that, which is like a brightness coming in. And all I'm doing is I'm hopping two chords in each direction. So if I go E and I go down to D, it's darkening. If I go E and I hop up to F sharp, then it's brightening. And each of these things gives a direction. So say I go like this, I might go here, right? And that's a direction. If I go here, then maybe I'll go here. And then, of course, you can change key. It's one of my hobbies, changing key. I do it as much as I can every day. It's a really interesting sensation when you change key, because your mind knows part of what's going on, and then part of it's unfamiliar. So, say I'm in E major, which of course I am, and I have this note G sharp, which is one of the notes in E major, one of the three notes. Now, G sharp is also in other chords. Another chord, for example, that it's in is C sharp major. So actually, can you sing this G sharp? So examine the feeling of being a G sharp right here. See? Okay, I'm going to change key now. You ready? Keep singing. Wow. Oh. So, thank you. So you're a bridge. You're a bridge from E to C sharp. It's just one note. And the feeling of having something that stays the same as other things change. Do we know like MC Escher? We know this? We know this guy? Legend. He really liked to play with perception, you know, the idea of a staircase that maybe is rising but also maybe is inverted and maybe it's going down, and he'd have people on different things. It's like the photograph of the old woman and the young girl, you know, the illusion? How many people know this illusion? Okay, I'm actually going to, I'll just show you. So, because what we're talking about is modulation of awareness. Who's this? Okay, let's see. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. So do you see how you can experience this image in at least two ways? And one way is where this line here, that's the young girl's chin and she's looking away. You see that? She's looking over her shoulder. And the other way is where this here is the old woman's mouth, and that's her chin protruding just there, and the big nose. It's exactly the reaction I was hoping for. It's a very simple idea, but it's actually it's beautiful. The feeling of it is like, ooh, you know, it's like actually feels like a physical change in your mind somehow. And that's what we just did here. You're thinking, you're a G sharp, but then you're a G sharp here. And all the relationships change. The whole map, your whole local map changes. And so essentially, I could go on literally for 500 hours about this, but to answer the question, I think that when we think about departing from home and returning home, it's just a matter of how do we control what's familiar, what's unfamiliar, what makes tension, what releases tension, and create satisfying arcs, more satisfying than that, where there's really a journey. I'll do like a miniature journey. What key shall I end in? Should you have a key to end in? F sharp. I heard F sharp. It's one of the best keys there is. So we're going to start in E major. Thank you.
While you have your laptop open, Justin, where's Justin Zakaria? You got a question that maybe while your laptop's open, he'll ask you a question about that.
Hello. Oh, hello. First off, love your production videos. They are the most interesting things I've ever watched.
Really?
I love your brain. It's exceptional.
Oh, thank you.
So to that, it leads me to, you're very, very thorough with your songs. That's a lot of tracks. So with that, how do you come up with all these ideas and constantly just continuously put more and more and more into it? And how long is the longest you've ever spent on a singular song? And could you possibly show us how you would start a song in Logic?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the question. So, okay, here's one I made earlier. Here's the thing. If I were to think, okay, I've got 646 simultaneous layers that are all adding up, it's overwhelming. That's like thinking, how do I make the musicians thing and the global fan base? And it's like, you can't do it. So what I think about is gestures. It's gestures. So at the top of the session, up here, I tend to keep a lot of the vocals. So what you see here, how many of you use Logic, are familiar with Logic as a software? So, yeah, that's good. So what I have here, right, is these are all, so this is a track, like this here, for example, is a track. And on this track, there is this here.
So I'll be singing in the star bright underneath the moonlight.
And that's my friend Mahalia singing the chorus. So every track has a set of, over here, it has a set of, we call them plugins. And these sort of altered the state of the track. So on this track, for example, we have some pitch correction, quite mild, to make sure that Mahalia only sings these notes. Here's a plugin, it's called Neutron. I wonder if it's going to load. Oh, there it is. Neutron is it's like an EQ plugin, I suppose. It also has some compression going on. And here's an exciter. And what this does is it adds to the kind of quality of the sound, you could say.
Singing in the star bright underneath the moonlight.
If I turn off this, then it sounds much darker and quieter. You know? So an exciter basically does what it says on the tin. It's exciting this frequency band out of all the frequency bands. Down here, this is like, you know? So the very top bit is like getting really excited by this plugin. 11.9 worth. And yeah, this compressor is
underneath the moonlight.
it's like squeezing the dynamic range so that everything fits within a particular band. You know this feeling where it's like, you know this feeling? Yeah, well, we call this sidechain compression. And sidechain compression is what happens when you compress a huge body of sound through the dynamic range of one particular track, normally the kick drum. So if I have like, and then I put a kick drum through the sidechain compressor, it goes, and every time a kick comes, it ducks the other track so that there's room for the kick drum. So it's almost like it changes all of the range of possible dynamics, and when something goes over that range, something has to get quieter to make room for this thing, you know. So what compression does is it just squeezes the dynamic range of a track and makes it appropriate, and it can also kind of glue it together, because like an uncompressed vocal might be like, you know, but if I compress it, it might go like, because the quieter sounds get louder and the louder sounds get quieter, and it's like reasonable, you know. I think this is what education does to brains a lot of the time, in a really unfortunate way. Like people get compressed. But you can use it tastefully. You can use it tastefully. It's nice when you do it tastefully. There's also some EQ here. I have to give credit where it's due. A lot of this EQ work was done by Ben Bloomberg, who's actually sitting up there on the desk, on the sound desk. And Ben is such a maestro when it comes to these kinds of things. And often I'll send Ben, a 600-track Logic session and say, how do I make sense of this? And Ben will say, let me just do some of this. So this here is Ben's handiwork. And what he's done is he's just sculpted certain frequencies out. So, here, for example, there's a particular frequency. In fact, let's see what frequency is. That one.
'Cause I love your smile and it makes me feel alright.
You think, we don't need that frequency. It doesn't flatter Mahalia. So we took it out. And anyway, that's one of 646 tracks. But the idea is that these tracks are in groups. So, for example, here,
So I'll be singing in the star bright underneath the moonlight.
they're all kind of doing a similar thing, but they're all individual voices.
So I'll be singing in the star bright. So I'll be singing in the star. So I'll be singing in the star bright. So I'll be singing.
But they all have a different purpose. Some of them add air, and some of them add body, and some of them
So I'll be singing in the star bright.
like that one has more body, more low end, you see. So each of these things has a different role to play, but gesturally speaking, this is one idea.
So I'll be singing
It'll be good if there's like a bunch of vocals. You should call it a gang vocal. Lots of vocals doing the
I'll be
chorus.
singing in the star bright underneath the moonlight.
And I'll give you a very brief anecdote, which is that I was stuck on this chorus.
'Cause I love your smile and it makes me feel alright.
And that line, I was stuck on it. I thought, I don't know what the melody should be, because for a while it like changed key. It was like, so I'll be singing in the starlight, I love you through all that, because I love your smile. And it went out to a different key, because I can't help myself. But anyway, Michael, my manager, who's actually here, he had this great idea that should go,
'Cause I love your smile and it makes me feel alright.
that's Michael. So I want to have a round of applause for Michael, please. Everything is teamwork. Everything is teamwork. Anyway, to cut a long story short, all the voices are up here. There's got all sorts of different bits here. Oh yeah, there's a bug in Logic where it always plays the da-da-da-da. Sorry. Maybe I can unsolo save that, right, Ben? There's like a... Where is it? See, this is the thing. Things get lost. Where did I leave the... Oh, here it is. Okay, if I unfreeze that, I bet it's going to... Oh. Yeah. I solved it. Okay. So there's lots of vocals here. So there are these groups of vocals, and you can put plugins, you can say, on individual tracks, but also on groups. And so here's, for example, it's a group of tracks. I'm going to fold that in. See that? I'm sure you're wondering what's in the Kiss Bus. Mwah. No, that was an accident, sorry. So no, the first sort of 200 tracks or so, they're all... Wanna make you feel the way I love. All voices, really. And like, there's some other plugins on here that you're unfamiliar with. Maybe this is a phaser, which goes... which mangles it, you know, so you don't get confused with it being the lead vocal. You think, oh, it's part of the texture, but it also feels like a voice, you know. So a lot of these ideas are I wouldn't necessarily say emotional ideas, but I would say they're kind of human ideas that are based in a feeling that I want to achieve somehow. And it's the same thing as like understanding the properties of E major and what happens if you add an A. What happens if you add the A? It thickens it, it creates a tension, it creates fourths and fifths, it like weights it, it weighs it down, but it also gives it like all these things. I mean, I could talk for so long about this because each thing is so lovely, but it's the same thing as understanding what plugins do, you know. So, for example, understanding that this plugin here, which is called LFO tool, this is the dynamic curve of the track. See that? If I turn that off, it just goes. Oh, it goes system overload. Story of my life. See, it just goes. And again, it's like you're painting a picture with a paintbrush, and you want the forest to be in the background, and you want the character to be in the foreground, or you want the sky to be, you know, or you're taking a photograph and you're thinking, I want this in focus, and it's the same process. You think, I want to make room for the kick. The kick is what needs to be in the front, because that's what gets people jigging, you know? And so this is just some sort of kick craft, where the vocal needs to just get out of the way so the kick can be like, you see that? But, you know, that is different from that, which is different from that. They're all really different. In the same way that, like, and are different, you know? Like, they're similar, but they're different. And I think what happens when you zoom into an idea and you're really listening for all the detail of it and understanding the way it feels in your body, these things become available to you. You think, actually, it's not dwa, it's dwa, you know? Dwa, dwa, or dwa, dwa, or dwa, dwa, you know, all these different curves. They're all different, and you can make up your own curve. So it's a very exciting time to be a creative human being this time in humankind, which is, it's also like a weird, bad time in other ways, but for creativity, like there's so many tools for articulating your idea. And even in my long, illustrious career of 5 or 6 years, the tools have really changed and become so much more exciting and available. There's just no end to things you can do with sound to make the sound interesting, you know? So I've spent, you know, I would say I've spent as long as piano or whatever with this program, even more maybe with this program, because just understanding what it means to put sounds on a canvas, it makes things so possible. And I promise I'll do 1.5 more minutes of this, and I'm going to come back to you. I wanted to show you some other things going on. This is the iconic sound that starts the song, and it's a combination of a few different things. There's a mellotron, there's an omnisphere sound. So a lot of these things are layers. That's the omnisphere sound. And That's like the mellow brass sound. So I thought, it needs a bit of life, it needs a bit of a texture, it needs a bit of high end to wake it up, to give it some zhuzh, you know? And so I did it. And then it's also mixed with this. It's like a much more of a weighty, more sine wavy type thing. And they combine, oh dear. Oh dear. I don't know, why is it telling me I frequently use the book ones? I've never used those. Anyway, the sound is born. So I guess as I go through this, to answer the question, the best ideas are instantaneous. They don't take planning. You don't plan your ideas. In the same way that you can't plan the truth. You can't plan what's true. You just have to turn up and receive it. And I think the same is true with ideas. You can't think, I'm going to have an idea and it's going to be this, and then, okay, now I'm going to have it, ready? It doesn't work like that. You have to, it's the same thing, you have to remove the boundaries and figure out what's within the heart of something. And, there's so many ways that could sound and feel, but in my head I thought, it's like, and that's as long as the idea took to make. It's like, okay. And then you start, and then you chase down the idea, and a lot of the skill set of being a producer is your ability to articulate that feeling, that sound, that emotion. And I will say, I never learned how to use Logic from anybody as a youth. I just sort of messed about with it for many years, and then accidentally was a professional musician. And I actually think that goes for lots of crafts and walks of life. You don't have to know the rules to get by. And I made up a lot of my own rules as a kid, and that was really helpful for me. But no one told me that you couldn't use this plugin to create this effect, or you couldn't record a drum kit with one little microphone on the top rather than like all these individual mics. I didn't have any crazy gear. I had like one SM58 microphone. Do you have an SM58 microphone? Anyone here? Yeah, it's a good mic, a good old Shure. It's a bog standard, great mic, and it was my one mic till I was 20 years old. It was just this one microphone. I did everything on it: bass, drums, percussion, vocals, guitars, and my kind of intention to make it work is way more about me believing that it's going to work than it is about whether or not it's working. In the same way that when I say ooh, I just know it's going to happen. But because it's happening already, and it just has to continue happening externally. Like it's happening already. I just need to extend the limb out, and then it's happening in the real world. And that sounds like an easy equation, but sometimes it's really hard. You think, well, this has never been done before, or there's no real way to do this. When I met Ben Bloomberg, who I mentioned before, who was an MIT PhD student in Boston.
Can he share the story with you?
Oh, yeah, Ben, you want to come down?
Here.
I was in grad school at the time, and
Where?
I was at MIT.
Studying?
Studying music tech in a research group called Opera of the Future. And so we did all kinds of things like robot opera and collaborative symphonies and stuff. And I saw the same video that Quincy saw, Don't You Worry About a Thing, and I thought, oh my God, I've never seen anything like this. And I sent Jacob a Facebook message just to the fan page, like out into the abyss, just being like, hey, like you're really awesome. If you ever need anything, I like to build things. And it turned out to be like good timing. Actually, I heard nothing for like 2.5 weeks.
Yeah.
and then
Michael found it. Yeah. He was like, I've seen this message has come in from this guy at MIT. We should probably respond. And so we did.
Yeah. I think it like went to your spam box or something.
Check your spam.
And so we started to think about, Jacob had been offered this like really amazing opportunity to open for Herbie Hancock and Chick Corea at the Montreux Jazz Festival, and it was like in front of 4,000 people on the main stage, and it was sort of like the first time you had ever had a show, really, like your own show. So we sort of sat down and we were like, well, what do you want to do? And so I guess the rest, as they say, is history.
Well, tell them what you built together, because you sort of brought it back to life for our Scale conference in 2019.
Oh, that's right. I remember
luckily, we convinced you to do that. But tell us about what you made, Jacob, as a one-man band, technologically and acoustically.
Yeah, I had this dream of basically touring the room at home in which I made all my music for my whole life. I grew up in North London, There was one specific room in my house that was filled with kind of music. Because the piano lived there and stuff. And I still make all my records in that very room, and I still live there. It's really a privilege. And so I wanted to take the room on the road rather than touring with a band, which is so predictable, you know, tour with a band. I thought I want to tour with my room. And so I said, Ben, I want to tour with the room. Ben said, okay, right. Well, let's talk it through. And we did. And the first thing we built was this vocal harmonizer, which those of you who were at the show, you would have met the harmonizer on Sunday. And it's a great beastie. Basically, I sing a note and play a series of other notes, and you hear my voice sing, my live voice sing all the notes I'm playing. So it's like a kind of scalable, real-time choir almost. I go like, wah, and all the notes come out that I hear in my head. And it was one of those things I dreamed of for so many years, but Ben was the one who brought it to life. It was like, well, Ben, how do we achieve this? And we sat together for a while and messed about. And
yeah, it's funny. I think at one point I had to figure out like how long it actually took us to do the solo show, and I think all together, because you were in London, I was in Boston, we did it in like 16 days, harmonizer and all the looping and everything. So it was actually pretty fast, but part of it was us going through and watching tons and tons of looping performances, and just being like, okay, like, well, what do we like about some of these? What do we not like about some of these? And one of the reasons I think we went for something like the harmonizer was because we saw all these people in these looping performances take forever to build up their harmonies. You'd have to wait for like 45 minutes while they sing every part, you know? And so part of that was to allow you to do these harmonies quickly in a looping performance. And so
a lot of the performances were quite linear. It was sort of like, you know, and then again. And we wanted to find a way of having 10 instruments on stage, but a way of combining them in a way that felt like it wasn't this same arc. It was this human-based kind of flexible, spontaneous system which combined like tracks that I'd recorded beforehand with fully live loops in it. It was this crazy grid structure that we kind of set together and designed. And then now we're touring, tomorrow and the day after we're playing at the Wilton, and this is a tour that sort of combines the one-man show with a 6-person band, and that's a whole different set of challenges. I love it. It's a real relief after all that click track to have people and things. But Ben was the kind of person who was not only just so extremely skilled, but also just wide open. He had an open mind to jump into this kind of void of, well, no one's really done it, but let's try it and see what happens. And I think in some ways we were lucky with the harmonizer, because it just kind of was like, oh, well, I think we got it.
Yeah.
And then I sort of said, okay, well, here's the next 60 things I'd like to build. You know, one by one we've kind of built them.
We've made some.
Well, you built them. Yeah.
But a great example of just offering to be useful to somebody. You've got so much value in your life and so many skills. Offer it to somebody.
Yeah.
And you don't have to be the one with the idea, but sometimes it helps to have somebody that's sort of already on the way. I just love this story when they shared it with it, and watching him work just gives me peace of mind that everything's going to go okay. So let's get you back in the booth. And wait, let's think of this. Which is a higher number, your age or the number of instruments you can play?
Me?
Yes.
I feel like you can play more than 27 instruments.
I don't know. I mean,
I know there's sometimes they're grouped, so you know.
I mean, maybe my age. I like, is a saucepan a music instrument or like a
So, some of the things you play on Instagram, you're like, what is that?
Right. Yeah, I don't know. I think everything's kind of a musical instrument. I think you are one as well.
I feel it. I feel it. What instrument or instruments were the toughest to develop skills on and learn?
Well, I started violin when I was 2, and I gave up when I was 4. It was too hard, and I was too impatient for results as well. It was like I wanted to have immediate results. I wanted to hit it and for it to go bang, you know. I didn't want to have to go for a year and then like slave away. And eventually it's, you know. But yeah, my mom is an incredible violinist, so it was also like intimidating to have her around. But I know it's like different dialects of the same language in some ways. Yeah. It's like when I play piano, I'm kind of playing the drums, I'm kind of playing the bass, I'm kind of singing. And I don't really know how to play a lot of the instruments I play either, but I have like a real faith that the music will come out of the instrument. And it tends to. It tends to. Sometimes it doesn't. Yeah.
I can only imagine the size of your repertoire in terms of what you can recall and play, just watching you sort of create on the spot.
Hi, Jacob.
Howdy.
My name's Will Kennedy. I'm a drummer with jazz group Yellow Jackets. And I'm also on faculty here at USC, Thornton. And thank you for being here. The lick of the day is woo-hoo!
Is it? That's great.
I thought I'd throw that in there.
Oh, I didn't know that.
When I'm in front of drum students, we talk often about providing a foundation, a ground for our bandmates to stand on and for the audience to be drawn to. We talk about getting inside the groove, the pocket, if you will. The difference between and really just kind of coming with it and bringing it alive. Do you ever experience dead grooves that come out that you just don't feel the life? Do you ever just give up on the song, or do you just keep beating it up? What
Oh yeah, all the time. Yeah, absolutely. Pocket is such an abstract thing to describe and articulate. And for I would say the majority of my life, I didn't have that deep a pocket, really. My pocket's still getting deeper now. But, and I guess, well, there are two parts of the question, I guess. One's about pocket, which I love and I would love to talk about for a long time, longer than we have. And the other is about kind of motivation to continue with ideas that don't float your boat immediately. To start with pocket, I suppose I feel like the best pockets are physical, like they're not mental. And when I was sort of learning the jazz world and starting out, I think I had this feeling that everything happened in your head. It's like, right, I'm going to think really hard about this music, and then this rhythm, and it's going to be really accurate and cool, and then here it is. And it was just awfully sort of cerebral and internal. And actually the best groove of all time is literally just this. This is just the best groove, and everyone knows the groove. Or breathing. Like that's all you're trying to do as a drummer or musician is to be in your body, really in your body. And so I think that I when I feel a groove in your body, like when you did the second example, you were like that, because it was in your body, and I think it's almost as simple as that. And the science of groove is the same. It's the same as harmony, because it's the same relationships, it's the same dissonance and consonance, but it happens in actually more of an invisible, abstract way, I think. Because, for example, swing, you know swing, Yep. If it's like this, right? This, the feeling of moving that slightly in a swung direction, it can change the whole picture, change the whole pocket. So you got like you can say that's 50% swing. It's exactly equal, like my nose is in the middle. If I go like that, if I go, like, does anyone know the band Knower? K-N-O-W-E-R? You know this band? It's like the hardest swinging, Lewis at the hardest swinging drummer ever. Like that's how strong it is. But just the power of moving. Like I'm a fan of 57%. I don't know about you, but like. So different from. It's like a machine. Well, it is a machine. Like 50% swing. But that 50, there's something about 50 set like that area. It's just like, It's just lovely. And so yeah, to cut long story short, studying now, and the only way to study it is to do it. You can't study it in your mind, you have to do it and see how it feels. I mean, there's a lot of grooves I made as a kid or a teenager. Like, I've been using recording software since I was 7 years old. I used Cubase for 4 years, and then I moved over to Logic when I was 11. And so there's a lot of kind of playing in. In fact, I can do it right now. If I show you. Should we add some drums to this, my song? I'll try and be as quick as I can with this. So I'm playing that on my keyboard. So here's the hi-hat, there's the kick, and that's the snare. So yeah, if I go like... God forbid I do that. Anyway, I did it though. Here's what I just played. Oh, crikey. And the cool thing about software, and this is how I learned to make things that were more rhythmically satisfying, is you can see all the parts here. You can see that this is a hi-hat, snare, and a kick. And you can see if you zoom in, there's some discrepancy here. The snare's slightly late. Slightly. So there's this ghastly thing in music software called quantization. Anybody heard of it? Anyone heard of auto-tune? It's exactly the same as auto-tune. And it rounds all of the beats to the nearest correct beat. And I'll show you what it does visually, because it's... Ugh. So you see how all these notes are all wiggly. Do you see these lines here, these vertical lines here? These faint lines. These are the subdivisions of the beat. And if I press Q here, just watch those notes. I'll do that again. And this is what it sounds like. Boo! Completely unkilling. Very unkilling. And so the balance is then, how do you create groove kind of by hand? You're like, how do you groove by hand? And same with piano. And again, if we had 7 hours, I'd explain. But the piano is not in tune with physics. It's out of tune with physics. It's in tune with a human-built system where there's 12 notes in every octave, which is one of many solutions to a problem, a physics-based problem about how to make chords sound good. And it's literally a long, long conversation. But with rhythm, it's kind of the same. The best grooves aren't grid-based. They don't swing the hardest. 50% is not that killing. I mean, like, techno is fine. In fact, sometimes it's great. But Samba's really good because it's wonky and weird. So as a kid, I used to sit for many hours and just move hi-hats around, move snares around, move kicks around, and try and find a balance that was really satisfying to me. And many a groove was created that sucked super hard. But I knew that I just kind of kept doing it because I knew that there would be things that I could extract from it. And I also listened to master groove makers like Jay Dilla, for example. Anyone a fan of Jay Dilla? Can I play you just like a really, really quick Jay Dilla groove? Because it's like, I love this. I have this in a playlist called Groove Science, which I refer to sometimes. Listen to how the tambourine is right on the back of the beat, and the snare is right on the front of the beat, and the kick is grounding it all together. Ready? So, it's right on the back. Actually, the kick is ahead. The snare's in the middle. That's just, it's like a scientist. He's like, how do I get the perfect chemical reaction, groove-wise, in my body to make sure that this is pulling this direction, this is pulling this direction, and this is in the middle. In the same way as this chord here goes to here. Because this is a G7 chord, am I right? I am right. And the F wants to go down to an E, and the B wants to go up to a C. So they pull apart. that's the tension, pulls apart. And the G is the anchoring there. And so the feeling of being like tension, release, that's what Dilla's doing here, but he's doing it in a perpetual time-based way, where this is pushing, this is pulling, and this is grounding, and you constantly like, it's really cool. It's really cool. So I'd recommend just messing with pocket and groove. But I love what you said about the idea that you make a foundation for people to grow and play over. That makes sense. I'm going to stop now. Yeah. One more?
Hi.
Hi.
My name is Ashley. I'm a classical guitarist and composer, and your concert on Sunday, I was there. It was the first concert I went to. It was awesome. Holy shit. Anyway, sorry. My question is, how do you make yourself uncomfortable? You know, as an artist, you want to put yourself in those places. Whether you want to be specific, you know, in terms of pushing your style or just in general to help cultivate inspiration in your life. Just curious, how do you go about that personally?
Yeah, it's a fabulous question. It's the perpetual search in some ways. It's like, how do you find the edge? Because the edge is where the goodness is. And if you're in the middle of your zone, the things you know, things you understand, the things you're comfortable with or have done before, if you're in the middle of that zone, then nothing's going to change. You can keep going like a hamster, but you're not going to move forwards. If you're completely outside that zone, then you're lost and you don't have the anchorage. And sometimes it can shock you into an idea, but often the best ideas, how do I? Here, like on the edge of your zone. Part in, part out. You spend your life, I think, gradually learning how to find the edge. And obviously the edge moves all the time too, because you don't have one edge that you're born with, it's your edge forever. And so I don't think you can necessarily, I can't necessarily say there's one way that I always do it or that it is always done. But I think that there's a certain amount of you just have to try that I had to learn when I was in my late teens and I had just met Ben and I was about to do this gig because I'd been inside my whole life making music in my mind, in my world, in my room. It was such an internal, introverted kind of scientific wonderland, you know, how do I move this force just over there? And a lot of the things I'd never really said them out loud because I understood them. But, you know, that first gig that we did in Montreux was a really crazy experience because, you know, we got the one-man show, and I knew how to play the instruments, and I basically knew what was going on in the show. Like, we'd never run it before the gig, but anyway, we did the gig. And, you know, I'm there, and there's videos of me performing, and I sort of, it's like I'm sort of there doing the instrument. I'll look up like that sometimes. No. And so like, oh, there's an audience. I don't know what to do with that, you know. 3 years later, I'm like bounding around, getting into, you know, and it's just about, I think it's experience, but it's being very comfortable with being kind of weird in front of people and being maybe a bit foolish as well, and also being wrong. And I think you can't create anything if the conditions for you creating something is that you're right. That's like a really ghastly, like, dead end to be in as a creative person, because I think a lot of things that are done improperly are much more interesting often in the arts than the things that are done properly. Sometimes people ask me, well, how do you find a voice that's your voice? You know, people think, I want to find, who am I in the world? And I think sometimes the answer is, first of all, what do you like? Which is a question that's just not asked enough in education, I think, period. I think, what do you like? What's important to you to make in the world? Because you're the one making it, and you're not, and you don't owe anybody anything. You make what you like. And the other part of it is the mucky kind of weird corners of things you don't. I don't know if I like that bit of myself, or that's a weird cobweb, or that's really dark and I don't get it, or this is really brazen and bold. That stuff that's the good muck, and using that in your expression is such a good and important kind of crucial element to being comfortable. Because if you're able to say, this is me and I'm really weird, then like a relief comes over you. At least I found for me, it's like a relief comes over you that nothing bad's going to happen. If people think you're really weird or like a complete disaster, it's actually quite nice. Like being misunderstood is quite fun. It's like, oh, okay, you know. And I think there's a real freedom about just kind of letting yourself be exactly the way that you are without feeling you need to change that for somebody else. But it's so easy to say that sentence, and it's so much harder to live it out. It is something that you can practice, though. I think you can practice saying, this is me, and I don't have all my shit together, you know, at all. And I don't really know how to play. I don't really know how to compose. I don't really know how to produce. But you can decide, you know what, I'm going to do it, though. And it's really a simple thing, but actually just saying, something will happen if I try. It's so true and so important. And you can't be guided if you're standing still. But if you take a step, then you're guided by something, even if it's that, you know. At least you're learning something by taking a step. You have to be willing to take that step. You have to be willing to say, I'm going to put myself out there. Let's see what happens. And again, it's like, what people make of you is not really, you can't plan it, you can't decide it, you can't design it, and it's none of your business. So you may as well just forget about it. And dance with it, you could say, for the rest of your life. You put yourself forward and you figure things out. But I feel the least fulfilled when I do something I've done before, or when I do something for somebody else's expectations. It's like, someone wants me to do it like this, so I'm going to do it like this. There's a real dissonance about that for me. And I think doing something that's just ever so slightly punk, you could say, is super important, especially in education, because education is the land of clarity and lines and structure. And say, I'm going to be cool with just doing it my own way, with all respect. I think it's important, and I think that you can decide to quest through your life and through your path in a way that feels like it belongs to you and like it doesn't belong to somebody else, and you can give yourself the license to be kind of a bit of a weirdo. And I just think that those people are the people who change the world, actually, because they're willing to say, what happens if you know, and it's super important, and it's not talked about enough. So that's what I'd say. Thank you.
So now you see why he fits into a business class on mindset and creativity. This is not just about how to be a great musician or a creator. It's about how to live a great life and how to build a great life. And I don't often take advice from a 27-year-old, but I actually think, no, and I shouldn't even say that, because you are an older, wiser soul in this body, and you've got a depth of experience that many of us will never sort of see. So I do listen, and I cherish our conversations, because while they may be about music, the answer is about how to live a good life. And that's what we're here to give USC students a competitive advantage in their careers and their lives, and hopefully they'll learn these lessons sooner rather than later. You let us inside your creative process, your mindset, your 600 plus tracks on Logic. It's just insane to see the just the accuracy and the detail of how your mind works. You talked about going away and coming home. Can you take us home on the piano with a song or two that
yeah,
we'll really remember?
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially for the seniors.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Turn down the lights, turn down the bell, turn down these voices inside my head. Lay here down with me. Tell me no lie. Just hold me close. Don't patronize me. Don't patronize me. 'Cause I can't make you love me if you don't. You can't make your heart feel something it won't. Here in the dark, these final hours, I will lay down my heart. Oh, feel the power that you want. I can't make you love me if you I close my eyes so that I won't see the love you don't feel when you're holding me. Morning will come and I'll give one drive. Give me till then, I'll give up the fight. You can't make your heart feel something it won't. Here in the dark, in these final hours, I will lay down my arms. I'll feel the power.
Thank you.
Jacob Collier.
Thank you very much. Oh.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Thank you very much.
How about one more? How about one more? Your tuition dollars hard at work.
You don't know, babe, when you hold me and you kiss me slowly, it's the sweetest thing. And they don't change. If I had it my way, you would know that you are. You're the coffee that I need in the morning. You're the sunshine in the rain when it's pouring. Won't you give yourself to me, give it all. I just want to see how beautiful you are. You know that I see it. I know you're a star. Where you go, I'll follow, no matter how far. If life is a movie, then you're the best part. You're the best part. Oh, whoa, 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 you're the best part. It's the sunrise and those brown eyes. You're the one that I desire. When we wake up and then we make love, it makes me feel so nice. You're the water when I'm stuck in the desert. You're the tablet that I take when my head hurts. You're the sunshine on my life. I just wanna see how beautiful. You know that I see it. If life is a movie, then you're the best part. Whoa, you're the best part. Whoa, you're the best part. Whoa, you're the best part. Whoa. If you love me, won't you say something? If you love me, won't you? Whoa! If you love me, won't you say something? If you love me, won't you? Love me, won't you? If you love me, won't you say something? Dum, dum, dum. If you love me, won't you? Oh! If you love me, won't you say something? If you love me, won't you? Love me, won't you? If you love me, won't you say something? If you love me, won't you? Ooh. If you love me, won't you say something? If you love me, won't you? Love me, won't you? If you love me, won't you say something? Yeah. If you love me, won't you? Ooh. If you love me, won't you say something? If you love me, won't you? Love me, won't you? If you love me, won't you say something? Say, if you love me, won't you? Woo! If you love me, won't you say something? If you love me, won't you? Love me, won't you say? If you love me, won't you say something? If you love me, won't you? Dum, 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 dum. Won't you say something? Dum, dum. If you love me, won't you say something? If you love me, won't you? Oh. If you love me, won't you say something? If you love me, won't you? Love me, won't you? If you love me, won't you say something? If you if you love me, won't you? If you love me, won't you? Love me, won't you? If you love me, won't you say something? If you If you love me, won't you say something? If you love me, won't you? Love me, won't you?
Jacob Collier. Come on, Trojans. Come on.
Thank you. Thank you, SE. Thank you very much. I'll see you very soon. Lots of love. Thank you, David. Thank you.
Jacob Collier, have a great week. Have a great night. Fight on. Always fight on. Beat the Bruins.